Random House Audio presents The Vessel, a Vanessa Munroe novella by Taylor Stevens. Read for you by Hilary Huber. Chapter 1. There was always a trail to follow, always a place to start. No matter how well hidden an object, how perfectly obscured the information, or how invisible the man, there was always a way. Some were easier to find than others. Just pick up a whiff and follow the scent. Others took hunting and patience. The most difficult was a target who knew she was coming, and he knew. Of course he knew. How could he not? When you backed a predator into a corner, when you took and destroyed all that she loved, when you made a game of ruining lives, and sadism for you was sport, when you turned the hope of death into a welcome relief, and then you failed to kill the predator, well, you'd better know that predator was coming back. This was an inviolable law. She wasn't dead, and so she was coming for him. She would find him, kill him. Simple as that. Vanessa Munroe drained the last of the beer, knocked the empty glass to the scuffed and scarred bar top, and, with a nod to the bartender, counted out from a handful of coins and laid the money beside the glass. Behind her, around her, voices rose and fell in tempo with the game playing on the small television. A shout of triumph shook the room, and she turned to the screen, same as every other man in the bar, watching through cigarette smoke for the goal replay. Then she pushed off the stool and stood. Armchair coaching erupted 2 tables over, and the man at the end of the bar flung a loud retort. Bellowed laughter filled the stuffy room, immigrant voices belonging to immigrant faces, the same group of men in frayed, drab clothes, with sun-leathered skin and gnarled fingers, who'd come and gone throughout the evenings Munroe had sat on this stool, listening, learning, absorbing. She'd followed the same nightly pattern for nearly 3 weeks, and spent the daylight hours in doorways along the corridor, wine bottle in hand, head tipped against stone or wood or concrete, or whatever the perch du jour might be. Just another apparent drunkard, surrounded by the poor and the struggling, while phrases and tones and speech shifted form and made shapes inside her head, as they did now in the bar, as they had her entire life. Language had defined her, made her who she was. Language, the savant-like ability to find the pattern in foreign sound, was a poisonous gift that had been with her since childhood. Without the gift, there would have been no teenage years spent running guns across West and Central African borders. Without the gun running, no nights in the equatorial jungles fighting off the worst of human predators. And without these nights, no instinct of self-preservation and the speed that kept her alive. Hood up and over her head, Munroe pushed through the old wooden door, out of the reek of stale beer and ripening body odor, into a late evening chill that announced the coming change of seasons, and onto a dark and quiet street where the past whistled on the wind and twisted in the swirling leaves. She glanced right, left. Her eyes tracked along the shadows of door frames and windows and the outlines of the men who claimed space on doorsteps, drowning away lives that were still only half-lived. Hands in her pockets, she headed for bed and the possibility of sleep. She walked a different route tonight than the one she'd walked the night before, and the night before that. Paths that she learned during the day because they were dark and without streetlights. Several minutes from the bar, 3 sets of footsteps took up behind her, keeping a healthy distance, but tagging after her nonetheless. She didn't turn to confirm their presence, didn't need to. Instinct, honed well from hunting and being hunted in the rainforest dark, had become an added sense, heightening hearing and ambient texture, providing sensory input that no light-polluted city dweller could match. Munroe reached an intersection and turned down an alley that led out of her way toward better streets and better light. She didn't quicken her pace. That would only entice them, the way running enticed a dog to the chase, would show weakness and fear, and convince them to follow, no matter what their original intent might have been. She led them on another block and stopped finally beneath one of the few working lamps, stood where they could clearly see her in worn leather work boots and torn jeans, with no watch, no belt, and nothing of value, nothing worth stealing but the few coins in her pockets. She searched behind them, and then up the buildings that lined the narrow street, probing shadows for potential surprises and sizing up the potency of the threat. The men stopped when she did. They kept 4 meters back, faces distorted by the relative dark, their clothes worn and tired, much like hers. That she stood here now, facing them, instead of running or hiding, should have been a warning at the least. But they were young, and with youth came undue boldness and presumed invincibility. "Not tonight," she said, loud enough for her voice to carry. "Whatever it is you want, you'll get it easier somewhere else." They didn't respond or reply to Ukrainian, so she tried again in Italian, and to this they reacted with sniggering and smirks. "A fight will end badly for you," she said. "Please just let me be." They didn't listen. They never listened. The young men moved in closer and separated, with 2 moving to flank her from either side. They would have done better to attack as a united front. She pushed her hood back and inhaled the night and the sweat of garbage and black water runoff. She watched them, measured them, and still they came closer, smirking and taunting, oblivious to the danger in her stillness, oblivious to her lack of fear. The smallest of the 3 drew a 6-inch knife. Streetlight glinted off the metal, and the present morphed into the past. Nights as a teenager spent in fear of the blade became the now, and the taps of adrenaline opened. Munroe relaxed into the chemical surge, comforting and familiar. The men drew closer, tightening the intended trap. The inner war drum pounded, building pressure, building speed and intensity with each booming fall of the mallet. The man with the knife swung. Muscle memory dodged the first awkward slash. Torture had primed her for speed and for survival. Size didn't matter much when she could move that much faster than her opponent. The world curved into a dark shade of gray, and focus, narrow and primal, turned this man into the man who had taught her to hate. Release would come through death, his or hers. She grabbed his wrist and forearm and pulled him into her. Enough pressure at the right point, and the ulna would snap like a bird's wing. Drove her knee between her hands and felt the break. His scream shattered the silence and was answered by howls from a pack of stray dogs in the distance. She followed through and forced a compound fracture. His reactions slowed, his brain trying to make sense of events that had shifted faster than he'd had time to register. She slammed a palm into his elbow, drove the broken arm back into his face, and twisted the knife free from the other hand. Whispers of air and movement reached out from behind, and she dropped, slashing through the thin material of track pants as she spun, carving a line across.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?